The golden doors of the imperial palace opened with a soft hiss. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked into the massive throne room with steady steps. Her simple black uniform looked plain against the bright colors and shining metals that filled the space. Around her, hundreds of alien beings watched from floating platforms and crystal balconies. The throne room was huge. It could hold 10,000 people easily. The walls were made of living crystal that changed colors with the Emperor's moods. Right now they glowed a cold blue. Floating lights danced in the air like tiny stars. The floor was smooth black stone. That reflected everything like a mirror. Elena had been in this room many times before. She had stood here as humans asked for better working conditions. She had stood here when humans requested fair pay for their work. She had stood here when humans begged for basic rights. Each time the answer was the same. Emperor Zixtara sat on his throne of carved bone and metal. He was 12 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin that looked like purple glass. His 6 eyes glowed yellow as they looked down at the small human woman. Behind him stood his advisors from the most important species in the galaxy, General Corax of the Warrior. Corvan people stood tall and proud. His red skin was covered in battle scars. His people were famous fighters who conquered worlds with their bare hands. They thought humans were weak because humans preferred to build things instead of breaking them. Next to him floated Scholar Vethis of the Zephyrian race. Her blue skin seemed to glow with inner light. The Zephyrians had the biggest brains in the galaxy. They could solve math problems that took computers days to finish. They thought humans were stupid because human brains were smaller. Minister Gallic of the Tridari merchant empire stood on the other side. His golden skin sparkled with embedded jewels that showed his wealth. The Tridari controlled most of the money in the galaxy. They owned banks and trading companies on 1,000,000 worlds. They thought humans were poor and worthless. These 3 species, along with dozens of others, made up the Galactic Council. They made all the important decisions. They decided which planets could join the Empire. They decided how much tax each world had to pay. They decided who lived and who died in wars that lasted for centuries. Humans were not on the Council. Humans had never been on the Council. For 300 years, humans had asked to join. For 300 years, the answer had been no. Elena walked forward until she reached the speaking circle. The crystal floor here was different. It glowed white and made her voice carry to every corner of the huge room. She had practiced what she would say many times. She knew this might be the last time humans would ever speak in this place. Your Imperial Majesty, she began with a small bow, I come before you today as the voice of humanity. We have served the galaxy faithfully for 3 centuries. We have fixed your ships when they broke down. We have built your cities and space stations. We have solved problems that others could not solve. We have done this work with pride and dedication. Some of the aliens in the room made sounds that might have been laughter. Others whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music or growling or clicking sounds. Elena ignored them and continued. Human engineers maintain the communication networks that let you talk to each other across the galaxy. Human technicians keep the life support systems running on your space stations. Human mathematicians calculate the paths your ships take through hyperspace. Human farmers grow much of the food that feeds your people. Human doctors have cured diseases that killed millions. Emperor Zixthara's eyes began to glow brighter. This was not the usual begging that humans did. Elena was listing facts, and everyone in the room knew the facts were true. We ask for 3 simple things, Elena said. First, we want seats on the Galactic Council so we can have a voice in decisions that affect all species. Second, we want fair payment for our work instead of the tiny amounts you give us now. Third, we want recognition that humans have made important contributions to galactic civilization. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. His 4 arms gripped the armrests. You dare to make demands of us? His voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. You forget your place, human. General Corax stepped forward. His hand rested on the plasma sword at his side. Humans are workers, nothing more. You build things because that is what you are good for. Corvan warriors protect the galaxy. We do not ask workers to join our war councils. Scholar Vethus floated down from her platform. Her voice was soft but filled with contempt. Human brains are simple. You can follow instructions and fix broken machines. But real thinking, real science, real discovery, these things require intelligence that humans simply do not possess. Minister Gallic laughed, and the jewels in his skin flashed with different colors. Humans have no money, no trade networks, no economic power. What could you possibly contribute to discussions of galactic commerce? You are paid what you are worth, which is very little. Elena listened to all of this without changing her expression. She had heard these insults before. Every human had heard them. They were taught these things about themselves from childhood. Many humans believed them, but Elena knew the truth. She had spent 50 years studying galactic history. She had looked at technical documents and construction records. She had traced the real sources of the galaxy's greatest achievements. The truth was very different from what these aliens believed. I see, Elena said quietly. So your answer is? No, again, the Emperor waved one of his hands dismissively. Of course it is no. Humans are adequate servants. You do simple work that keeps our civilization running. But you are not leaders, you are not thinkers, you are not warriors. You are certainly not equals. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. It was black and smooth, about the size of her palm. Red lights blinked on its surface in a pattern that looked almost like a heartbeat. Then I inform you, Your Imperial Majesty, that humanity withdraws its services from the Galactic Empire, effective immediately. She pressed a button on the device. The red lights stopped blinking and glowed solid red. Somewhere far away, on thousands of worlds and millions of space stations, similar devices received the signal and began to activate. The throne room went very quiet. Even the whispers stopped. Emperor Zixthara stared at the human woman like she had just claimed to be a god. You withdraw your services? The Emperor's voice was filled with disbelief. You cannot survive without the Empire. Where will you go? What will you do? You need us more than we need you. Elena put the device back in her pocket. She looked up at the massive alien on his throne of bone and metal. For the first time in 300 years, a human looked at the Emperor without fear or respect or hope. She looked at him with something much worse. She looked at him with pity. We will see about that, she said. Elena turned and walked toward the golden doors. Her footsteps echoed in the silent room. No one tried to stop her. They were all too shocked to move. As she reached the doors, Elena paused and looked back one last time. You might want to check on your life support systems, she said. And your communication networks and your navigation computers. Good luck. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. In the throne room, Emperor Zixthara sat in stunned silence. General Corax, Scholar Vethus, and Minister Gallic looked at each other with confusion. None of them understood what had just happened. They thought Elena was bluffing. They thought humans were too weak and too dependent to actually leave. They thought the galaxy could run perfectly. Well, without human workers, they were about to learn how wrong they were. Outside the palace, Elena walked to her small ship. She did not look back at the crystal spires and floating towers of the Imperial capital. She had work to do. Across the galaxy, 3 billion humans were waiting for her. Signal to come home. It was time for humanity to stop serving those who despised them. It was time for the galaxy to learn what humans were really worth. 2 days after Elena Vasquez left the Imperial Palace, Captain Thrak of the Corvan Navy noticed something strange. He was commanding the battleship Crimson Thunder as it patrolled the outer rim of the galaxy. The ship was massive, built for war, with enough firepower to destroy entire cities, but something was wrong with the air recycling system. The air felt thick and hard to breathe. When Thrak called the engineering deck, the Corvan engineers told him they could not fix it. They did not know how the system worked. They had always called human technicians to handle such problems. Thrak was not worried. He was a warrior. Warriors did not fear broken machines. He ordered his crew to wear breathing masks and continue their patrol. The human who used to maintain their ship had disappeared 2 days ago. Like all humans on Corven's ships, she had simply vanished during the night shift. On the other side of the galaxy, Scholar Quantum of the Zephyrian High Institute was having her own problems. The massive computer that ran her research facility had started making errors. Simple math problems were giving wrong answers. Complex calculations were failing completely. Quantum was considered one of the smartest beings in the galaxy. Her brain could process information faster than most computers. But when she looked at the computer's inner workings, she found systems she did not understand. Tiny components and pathways that seemed to have no purpose. When she tried to remove them, everything stopped working. She realized with growing alarm that the human technicians who maintained the computer had built improvements into it. Improvements that the Zephyrians had never noticed or understood. Now those humans were gone, and the computer was slowly forgetting how to work. In the commercial district of the capital world, Minister Gallic was facing a crisis of his own. The Tridari banking system was showing strange delays. Money transfers that should take seconds were taking hours. Some transactions were disappearing completely. Trade ships were arriving at the wrong destinations. Gallic called his best financial experts to find the problem. They discovered that the banking network relied on thousands of small programs that corrected errors, optimized routes, and predicted market changes. All of these programs had been written by humans. All of them were now shutting down one by one. The Tridari experts tried to rewrite the programs, but they were impossibly complex. Each program connected to dozens of others in ways that made no sense. It was like trying to rebuild a watch when you had never seen the inside of one before. Back on the Imperial throne world, Emperor Zixthara was receiving reports from across the galaxy. At first they seemed like minor annoyances. A communication delay here, a navigation error there, a life support glitch on some distant station, but the reports kept coming. And they were getting worse. The hyperspace communication network that connected the galaxy was failing piece by piece. Messages between star systems were taking longer to arrive. Some messages were not arriving at all. The network had millions of relay stations, and each one needed constant adjustment to work properly. Humans had done those adjustments for 3 centuries. General Korak stood before the Emperor's throne, his red skin darker than usual with anger. "The human workers on our ships have vanished," he reported. "Not just left their posts, vanished, their quarters are empty. Their personal belongings are gone. Security cameras show them going to sleep in their beds, but by morning they are nowhere to be found." Scholar Vethis floated beside him, her usual calm disturbed. "The same thing has happened at our research facilities. Thousands of human technicians and support staff have disappeared without a trace. They left no messages, no explanations. They simply are not there anymore." Minister Gallic's jeweled skin was flashing nervous colors. "Our trade networks are experiencing system failures across 17 sectors. The humans who managed our logistics algorithms have abandoned their posts. We are trying to replace them, but the systems are far more complex than we realized." Emperor Zixthara listened to these reports with growing irritation. "Find them," he commanded. "Send ships to human colonies. Demand they return to work. Arrest their leaders if necessary." General Korak shifted uncomfortably. "We have tried, Your Majesty. We sent fleets to 12 human colony worlds. The colonies are still there, but they are not responding to our communications. Our ships cannot get close to them." "What do you mean they cannot get close?" the Emperor demanded. "There appears to be some kind of barrier around human space," Korax explained. "Our sensors detect the planets and space stations, but when our ships try to approach, their navigation systems fail. Engines shut down for no reason. Communication equipment stops working. We have lost contact with 3 scouting fleets." Scholar Vethis spoke up. "We believe the humans have developed some form of technological defense system. Our science teams are studying the phenomenon, but progress is slow without human technical support." The Emperor's 6 eyes blazed with fury. "Impossible. Humans do not have such technology. They are simple workers, nothing more. But even as he spoke these words, Emperor Zixtara felt a cold doubt growing in his mind. If humans were so simple, how had they vanished so completely? How had they built defenses that the mighty Corvan fleet could not overcome? Across the galaxy, the problems were spreading faster than anyone had expected. On the agricultural world of Verdania, the automated farming systems that fed billions of people were breaking down. The machines still worked, but they were planting crops in wrong places, using too much water, harvesting too early or too late. The Verdanian farmers called for help, but the human agricultural specialists who usually managed the systems were gone. Local technicians tried to reprogram the machines, but the software was written in human languages and used human logic patterns that other species found impossible to follow. On the mining stations of the asteroid belt, the ore processing plants were shutting down one by one. The humans who operated them had built the systems to run automatically, but they needed constant small adjustments to work efficiently. Without those adjustments, the plants were either destroying valuable materials or producing worthless slag. The space elevators that connected planets to their orbital stations were developing mechanical problems. These massive structures carried millions of tons of cargo every day. Human engineers had designed safety systems to prevent catastrophic failures, but those systems were now sending warning signals that no one else knew how to interpret. In the medical centers of 100 worlds, alien doctors were discovering that many of their diagnostic machines and treatment devices had been modified by human technicians. The modifications made the machines work better, but without human maintenance. The improvements were failing. Patients who should have been easily cured were developing complications that baffled the medical staff. The hyperspace beacon network that guided ships safely through faster-than-light travel was experiencing coordinate drift. The beacons needed to be recalibrated constantly as stars moved and gravitational fields shifted. Human navigators had done this work so quietly that most people forgot it was necessary. Now ships were emerging from hyperspace thousands of miles from their intended destinations. Some ships were emerging inside asteroid fields or too close to stars. Emergency rescue operations were launched, but the rescue ships were having their own navigation problems. The Corvan Navy was losing more ships to accidents than they had lost in the last major war. Emperor Zixtara called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 50 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices filling the air with worried discussions in dozens of languages. The universal translator that let them all understand each other was starting to make errors, turning important words into nonsense. "This cannot continue," the Emperor declared. "The humans are obviously using some kind of sabotage to force us to accept their demands. We must show them that the galaxy will not be blackmailed by servants." But Council Member Apex of the Crystalline Silicate Federation spoke up with a voice like breaking glass. "Your Majesty, our preliminary analysis suggests this is not sabotage. The human workers appear to have simply stopped working. The systems are failing because they were designed to need constant human maintenance." "That is impossible," snapped General Corax. "We designed those systems. We built those ships and stations." "Did we?" Scholar Vethus asked quietly. "I have been reviewing historical records. Much of our technology shows signs of human modification and improvement going back centuries. We may have been taking credit for human innovations without realizing it." The council chamber fell silent. The idea that humans might have been more important than anyone realized was too disturbing to accept easily. But outside the chamber, across the galaxy, reality was making the truth impossible to ignore. The civilization that had dismissed humans as simple workers was discovering that those workers had been holding everything together, and now they were gone. In the depths of space, human ships moved silently toward destinations that only they knew. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was finally beginning to understand what it had lost. The silence was spreading, and with it came the first whispers of fear. 2 weeks after the humans disappeared, Captain Thrak was dying. The Crimson Thunder drifted dead in space, its mighty engines cold and silent. The breathing masks had run out of power 3 days ago. Half his crew was already unconscious from breathing poisoned air. Thrax sat in his command chair, gasping for breath. Around him, his officers lay slumped over their stations. The great Corvan warrior who had conquered 12 worlds could not defeat a broken air recycling system, the ship's computer kept flashing warnings in human text that none of them could read. The engineering manuals were written in human languages with human technical terms. Even the repair tools had been designed for human hands and minds. Thrax tried to send a distress signal, but the communication system was failing too. The last message he received was from Admiral Vex of the Home Fleet. 60% of our ships are disabled. Request immediate assistance. That was 2 days ago. The mighty Corvan Navy, terror of the galaxy for 800 years, was helpless. Without the humans they had scorned. On the research world of Zephyria Prime, Scholar Quantum watched her laboratory crumble around her. The climate control systems had failed first, filling the building with toxic gases from the chemical storage areas. Then the power grid collapsed as automated safety switches activated in sequence, cutting electricity to prevent fires and explosions. Quantum and her team had tried to override the safety systems, but every attempt made things worse. The switches were connected to thousands of other systems in ways that made no logical sense. Or rather, they made sense to human minds, but not to Zephyrian intellect. The greatest minds in the galaxy stood helpless. Before maintenance systems built by the species they had called stupid, outside her laboratory, the city was going dark. Zephyria Prime was home to 50 million of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy. But intelligence meant nothing when the water treatment plants stopped working and the food distribution networks broke down. The Zephyrians had always prided themselves on their mental abilities. They could solve mathematical puzzles that would take computers years to finish. But they could not figure out how to restart a sewage treatment plant that had been maintained by human technicians. In the commercial heart of the galaxy, Minister Galak was watching the Tridari financial empire collapse in real time. The banking networks that moved trillions of credits across the galaxy had shut down completely. Trade ships were stranded in space, unable to buy fuel or supplies because the payment systems no longer worked. Galak's team of economic experts had spent 2 weeks trying to rebuild the financial networks. But every system they fixed broke 2 others. The human-designed programs were interconnected in ways that seemed almost organic, like the roots of a vast tree spreading through every aspect of galactic commerce. Without the banking networks, trade between worlds had stopped. Planets that depended on imported food were facing starvation. Worlds that exported raw materials could not sell them. The economic engine of the galaxy was grinding to a halt. Galak stood in his office, looking out at the capital city below. Half the lights were out. Floating cars had crashed when their navigation systems failed. The great towers of the financial district stood empty as their elevators stopped working and their environmental systems broke down. The Tridari, masters of galactic commerce, were reduced to bartering like primitive tribes. Emperor Zixthara sat alone in his throne room, surrounded by reports of disaster. The crystal walls had turned black, reflecting his mood. The floating lights had dimmed to almost nothing. Even the palace was failing as its complex systems broke down one by one. General Korax was missing, probably dead with his fleet. Scholar Vethus had not responded to communications for 3 days. Minister Galak's last message had been a desperate plea for help that the Emperor could not provide. The reports on his desk painted a picture of civilization collapsing. 90% of the galactic communication network was down. 3/4 of all space traffic had stopped moving. 17 major worlds had declared states of emergency. 4 systems had gone completely dark. The Emperor picked up one report that made his hands shake. It was from the food production world of Agros 7. The planet's entire agricultural system had shut down when the automated farming networks failed. 20 billion people across 6 star systems depended on food from Agros 7. Without it, they would starve within months. Another report described the failure of the asteroid mining operations that provided raw materials for shipbuilding. The processing plants had shut down when their human operators vanished. Without new materials, the Navy could not repair its damaged ships. A third report came from the Medical Research Station at Helix Point, the facility that developed cures for galactic diseases had lost power when its reactor safety systems activated. The human technicians who knew how to restart the reactor were gone. Billions of patients across the galaxy would die without the medicines produced at Helix Point. Emperor Zixtara realized with growing horror that the humans had not just maintained the galaxy's technology. They had been its foundation. Every system, every network, every critical function depended on human knowledge and human work. The species that had dismissed humans as simple servants had built their entire civilization on human backs, on the military. Command world of Corvin Prime Admiral Vex was learning the same terrible truth. She had managed to gather the surviving ships of the Corvan Navy in orbit around their home planet. Out of 3,000 warships, only 400 were still operational. The others drifted in space like metal coffins, their crews dead or dying. The mighty Corvan military machine had been revealed as completely dependent on the humans they had treated as inferiors. Admiral Vex tried to contact other military forces across the galaxy, but the communication networks were too damaged. She received fragments of messages from desperate commanders begging for help. She could not provide. The Corvan had always believed that strength came from violence and conquest. They had built the largest military force in galactic history. But that force meant nothing when their ships could not fly and their weapons could not fire. On Zephyr Prime, the few remaining functional research facilities were working frantically to understand how human technology worked. But it was like trying to understand a language written in concepts their minds could not grasp. Human engineering followed patterns that seemed random and inefficient to other species. But when those patterns were removed or changed, everything stopped working. The humans had built redundancy and flexibility into every system, anticipating problems that other species never considered. Dr. Synthesis, one of the most brilliant Zephyrian scientists, made a disturbing discovery while studying the remains of a communication relay. The device contained hundreds of components that seemed unnecessary. When she analyzed their function, she realized they were backup systems and error corrections that prevented total failure. The humans had not just built technology to work. They had built it to keep working even when parts failed or conditions changed. They had anticipated every possible problem and prepared solutions in advance. It was a level of careful planning and systematic thinking that the superior Zephyrian intellect had completely missed. In the deepest vaults of the Imperial Treasury, emergency teams were discovering another horrifying truth. The massive computers that managed the galaxy's financial records were failing. But before they died, they revealed their programming history. Every major economic model, every trade algorithm, every financial prediction system had been written or improved by human programmers. The galactic economy that the Tridari claimed to control had actually been designed and maintained by the species they paid the least. The humans had not just maintained the galaxy's wealth. They had created it. Emperor Zixtara stood on the highest balcony of his palace, looking out at the dying city below. Emergency services had stopped functioning when their dispatch systems failed. Hospitals were closing as their medical equipment broke down. Transport networks had collapsed as their control systems went dark. In the distance, he could see the spaceport where thousands of alien refugees were trying to flee to other worlds. But most of the ships were grounded with mechanical problems, and those that could still fly had nowhere to go. Every world in the galaxy was facing the same crisis. The Emperor thought about Dr. Elena Vasquez and her quiet warning about checking the life support systems. He wondered if she had known this would happen. He wondered if the humans had planned this collapse or if they had simply been holding it back through their constant work. Either way, the result was the same. The galaxy was dying and only the humans knew how to save it. But the humans were gone, disappeared behind barriers that no one could cross. They had withdrawn not just their labor, but their knowledge, their skill, and their willingness to serve those who despised them. For the first time in his long life, Emperor Zixthara felt truly afraid. He ruled an empire of 1,000,000,000,000 beings, but he was powerless to save them from the consequences of his own arrogance. The cascade had begun, and there was no way to stop it. 2 months after the humans vanished, Dr. Keshtal was digging through the ruins of the Great Archive on Kepler Station. The ancient library had lost power weeks ago when its fusion reactor shut down. Emergency lighting flickered as she worked. Her way through collapsed shelves and scattered data crystals, Keshtal was a Vorthan archaeologist, one of the few species that had always treated humans with respect. Her people were scholars who studied the past instead of trying to conquer or control the future. While the galaxy burned around her, she searched for answers in the oldest records she could find. The Great Archive contained documents from the early days of galactic civilization, before the great species had formed their empire. Most of the records were damaged or corrupted, but Keshtal was patient. She had spent 30 years learning to read dead languages and decode broken files. What she found made her drop the data crystal she was holding. The earliest records told a very different story than the official histories. According to these ancient documents, humans had not joined galactic civilization 300 years ago. They had been part of it for over 2,000 years. The first hyperspace drive was not invented by the brilliant Zephyrians. It was created by a human scientist named Dr. Sarah Chun. In the year 2156, the Zephyrians had stolen her research and claimed it as their own work. The universal translator that allowed different species to communicate was not developed by the wise council of languages. It was built by a human linguist called Professor James Mitchell. His name had been erased from all official records. The terraforming technology that made hostile planets livable was not discovered by the Ecological Institute. It was designed by Dr. Maria Santos, a human biologist whose work had saved billions of lives across the galaxy. Keshtal kept reading, her excitement growing with each discovery. Every major breakthrough in galactic history had the same pattern. A human would make an incredible discovery or invention. Then a more respected species would claim credit for the work. The human's name would disappear from the records. She found files about the great space elevators that connected planets to their orbital stations. Human engineers had designed them. She found blueprints for the massive city ships that housed millions of people. Human architects had planned them. She found the mathematical formulas that made faster-than-light communication possible. Human scientists had created them, but the most shocking discovery was still to come. In the deepest part of the archive, Keshtal found a sealed data vault that had survived the power failure. Inside were files marked with symbols she had never seen before. When she finally decoded them, she realized they were written in an ancient human language called English. The files were reports from something called the Human Caretaker Council. The reports went back 1,500 years. They described a secret organization of humans who had been quietly guiding galactic civilization from behind the scenes. According to the reports, the humans had discovered other intelligent species long before those species developed space travel. Instead of conquering them or revealing themselves as superior, the humans had chosen to help them grow and develop. Human agents had carefully introduced new technologies to other species, making it seem like natural discoveries. Human scientists had solved problems that would have destroyed entire civilizations, then given credit to local researchers. Human engineers had built the infrastructure that connected the galaxy, then stepped back to let others take control. The files described a philosophy called benevolent guidance. The humans believed that forcing their knowledge on other species would make those species dependent and weak. Instead, they worked secretly to help each species develop its own strengths while preventing disasters that could destroy them. Keshtal read report after report describing human interventions that had saved the galaxy countless times. When the Coven almost destroyed themselves in a civil war, human peacekeepers had secretly negotiated the treaties that ended the fighting. When the Zephyrians developed a plague that threatened to kill their entire species, Human doctors had created the cure and made it appear to come from Zephyrian research. When the Tradari economic system collapsed from corruption and greed, human economists had redesigned their banking networks to be more stable and fair. When asteroid impacts threatened to destroy inhabited worlds, human engineers had built defense systems and let the local governments think they had done it themselves. For 15 centuries, humans had been the secret guardians of galactic civilization. They had prevented wars, cured diseases, stopped natural disasters, and solved problems that other species never even knew existed. But the most disturbing discovery was in the most recent files. The Human Caretaker Council had been debating whether to continue their secret protection of the galaxy. Many humans felt that the other species had become too arrogant and cruel. They were taking credit for human work while treating humans as inferior servants. The final report was dated just 3 months ago. It was a vote by the entire Human Caretaker Council. The question was simple: should humanity continue to protect and serve a galaxy that despised them? The vote was unanimous. No. Kestrel sat in the flickering emergency lights, staring at the data crystal in her hands. Everything she thought she knew about galactic history was wrong. The humans were not the servants of civilization. They were its creators and protectors, and now they were gone. She thought about all the disasters happening across the galaxy. Ships dying in space because their life support systems failed. Planets going dark because their power networks collapsed. Billions of people facing starvation because food distribution systems broke down. All of these systems had been built and maintained by humans. Not just the recent ones, but going back centuries. The humans had been quietly keeping everything working while the other species took credit for their achievements. Kestrel activated her personal communicator, hoping it still worked. She needed to tell someone what she had discovered. But who would believe her? And even if they did believe her, what could anyone do about it? The communication device crackled to life. She managed to reach her research assistant, Dr. Venn, who was stranded on a nearby planet when his transport ship broke down. Dr. Kestrel, Venn's voice was filled with relief. I thought you were dead. The whole sector has gone dark. Nothing is working anymore. Venn, I need you to listen carefully, Kestrel said. I have found something in the archives. Something that changes everything we know about galactic history. She spent the next hour explaining her discoveries. Venn was silent for a long time. After she finished, You were saying that humans built our entire civilization? He finally asked. Not just built it, Kestrel replied. They have been secretly maintaining it and protecting it for over 1,000 years. Every time we faced a crisis that could have destroyed us, humans solved it and let us take credit. Then why did they leave? Venn asked. Kestrel looked at the vote record on her screen. Because we treated them like servants when they were actually our guardians. We took their gifts and scorned the givers. We called them stupid while they quietly saved us from our own mistakes. As if to emphasize her point, the lights in the archive flickered and went out completely. Kestrel's communicator died with a soft beep. The emergency power had finally failed. She sat in the darkness, thinking about the implications of what she had learned. The galaxy was not just facing technical problems. It was experiencing the withdrawal of protection that had kept it safe. For centuries, without human guidance, how long would it take for the great species to destroy themselves? How many wars would start when the communication networks failed completely? How many planets would die when their life support systems collapsed? The humans had not abandoned the galaxy in anger. They had simply decided to stop saving it from itself. Somewhere in the darkness above her, Kestrel knew that human ships were watching and waiting. They were probably recording everything that happened, studying how their former charges would handle the crisis. She wondered if this was a test. If the galaxy could prove it had learned to value cooperation over conquest, knowledge over arrogance, service over domination, would the humans return? Or was this humanity's final gift to the species they had protected for so long? The chance to grow up and take responsibility for their own survival? In the ruins of the Great Archive, surrounded by the proof of humanity's secret guardianship, Dr. Keshtal made a decision. If she survived the collapse, she would make sure the truth was known. The galaxy needed to understand what it had lost. More importantly, it needed to understand what it had never deserved in the first place. The humans had been angels, and the galaxy had treated them like servants. Now the angels were gone, and only the truth remained in the darkness. 6 months after humanity vanished, Emperor Zixthara stood alone in the ruins of his throne room. The crystal walls were cracked and dark. The floating lights had fallen to the floor like dead stars. The throne of bone and metal looked small and meaningless in the empty space. Outside the broken windows, the capital city was dying. Half the buildings stood empty, their lights gone out forever. The great spires that had reached toward the sky now looked like the bones of some massive creature that had starved to death. The emperor was dying too. The palace life support systems had failed 3 weeks ago. The air was thin and poisonous. His 6 eyes, once bright with power and pride, were dim and cloudy. His 4 arms shook as he tried to stand. Across the galaxy, the collapse was complete. Billions had died when life support systems failed on space stations and ships. Entire planets had gone dark when their power networks shut down. The great trade routes that had connected 1,000 worlds were empty of traffic. The Corvan Navy was gone. Most of their ships drifted in space as metal tombs. The few surviving warriors had abandoned their posts and returned to their home worlds to die with their families. The Zephyrian research stations were silent. The greatest minds in the galaxy had been defeated by maintenance systems they could not understand. Many had died trying to restart critical equipment, electrocuted or poisoned by machines that no longer recognized their commands. The Tridari commercial empire had vanished overnight. Without working computers or communication networks, trade between worlds became impossible. The merchant princes who had once controlled galactic wealth now lived like beggars, trading scraps of food for broken tools. But something had changed in the past month. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy, carried by the few remaining ships that could still travel between stars. The reports all told the same impossible story. The humans were helping, not openly, not officially, but wherever disaster struck worse, human ships would appear. They would repair critical life support systems, restore power to dying hospitals, fix communication arrays just long enough for emergency calls to get through. The humans never identified themselves. They never asked for thanks or payment. They would arrive in unmarked ships, fix what was broken, and disappear before anyone could talk to them. On the agricultural world of Verdania, where 20 billion people were starving, a human ship had restored the automated farming systems. The repairs were done in a single night. By morning, the machines were working perfectly, but the ship was gone on the medical station at Centauri 7. Where thousands of patients were dying from diseases that could not be treated. Human technicians had appeared during a power failure. They had fixed the diagnostic machines and synthesis equipment, then vanished in the darkness. Emperor Zixthara had received dozens of these reports. Each one made him feel smaller and more ashamed. The humans were still protecting the galaxy, even after being dismissed as worthless servants. Even after being scorned and rejected, they were saving lives. Dr. Keshtal's discoveries had been transmitted to every surviving government before the communication networks failed completely. The truth about humanity's role as secret guardians had spread across the galaxy. Now everyone knew that the great species had been taking credit for human achievements for over 1,000 years. The Emperor thought about Dr. Elena Vasquez and her quiet dignity when she had delivered humanity's final message. She had known this would happen. She had known that the galaxy would collapse without human support. But she had also known that humans would not let billions of innocent people die, even if their leaders were too proud to admit their mistakes. A soft sound made the Emperor turn his head. Someone was walking across the broken floor of the throne room. The footsteps were light and careful, avoiding the fallen debris and scattered crystals. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was a human child, perhaps 10 years old, wearing simple clothes and carrying a small device that glowed with soft blue light. The child walked calmly through the ruins, showing no fear of the dying emperor or the poisoned air. "How?" the emperor whispered. His voice was weak and rasping. "How are you here?" "The barriers around human space." The child looked up at him with clear, intelligent eyes. "There were never any barriers, Your Imperial Majesty. Our ships simply stopped responding to your commands. We were never trapped. We chose to leave." The emperor stared at the small human. "Then why have you come back? Why are your people still helping us after what we did?" The child walked closer, her footsteps echoing in the empty throne room. "Because that is who we are. We help others even when those others do not deserve help. It is what makes us human." "I do not understand," the emperor said. "We treated you as servants. We stole credit for your work. We called you inferior and worthless. Why do you still save us?" The child sat down on a piece of fallen crystal, making herself comfortable. "Do you have children, Emperor Zixtara?" The emperor nodded weakly. "I had 12 sons and daughters. They are all dead now. The palace life support failed." "When your children were young, did they ever break things? Did they make mistakes that could have hurt them?" "Of course," the emperor replied, confused by the question. "And when they did you abandon them? Did you let them suffer because they have been foolish?" The emperor felt tears forming in his dying eyes. "No, I protected them. I fixed their mistakes. I kept them safe because I loved them," the child nodded. "That is how humans see the galaxy. You are all our children, in a way. Younger species, who need guidance and protection. When you make mistakes, we fix them. When you break things, we repair them. Not because you deserve it, but because it is the right thing to do." "But we are not children," the emperor protested. "We are ancient civilizations. We conquered stars when humans were still primitive." The child's expression became sad. "Your bodies grew up, but your minds stayed young. You still fight over toys like children. You still take credit for things you did not do. You still hurt others because you are afraid of not being special." The emperor tried to speak, but the child held up her hand. "Humans learned something long ago that other species have not learned yet. True strength comes from lifting others up, not putting them down. Real power comes from serving others, not ruling them. The greatest achievement is not to be better than everyone else, but to help everyone else become better." "Then why did you leave?" the emperor asked. "If you see us as children, why did you abandon us?" The child stood up and walked to the broken window. She looked out at the dying city. "Below?" "Because sometimes the only way children learn is by facing the consequences of their actions. We could have kept fixing your mistakes forever, but you would never have grown up. You would never have learned to take care of yourselves." "The billions have died," the emperor whispered. "Yes," the child said quietly, "and we grieve for every one of them. But billions more would have died in the wars and disasters that would have come if you had never learned wisdom. Sometimes the hardest kind of love is letting someone fail so they can learn to succeed." The emperor felt his strength fading. The poisoned air was finally defeating his alien physiology. "What happens now? Will humanity return? Will you save US?" The child turned back to him, her eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "The galaxy is free to govern itself now. Some species will learn from this disaster and become wiser. Others will not survive their own mistakes. Humans will continue to help where we can, but we will not control or guide anymore." "You will let us fail? We will let you choose," the child said. "For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy belongs to its inhabitants, not to its hidden guardians. What you do with that freedom is up to you." The emperor closed his eyes. He could feel his life slipping away, but for the first time in months, he felt something other than despair. He felt understanding. "I was wrong," he whispered. "We were all wrong. Humans were never our servants. You were our teachers, and we failed the test." The child walked over to his throne and placed her small hand on his arm. Where she touched him, the pain faded and breathing became easier. "Tests can be retaken," she said gently. "Lessons can be learned again. But next time you will have to Learn them without us holding your hand. The Emperor opened his eyes one last time and looked at the human child. In her young face he saw the wisdom that his species had spent centuries refusing to acknowledge. Will the galaxy survive without you? He asked. The child smiled, and for a moment the broken throne room seemed brighter. That depends on whether it has finally learned to grow up. She stepped back into the shadows and was gone, leaving the Emperor alone with his understanding. Outside, a human ship lifted silently from the palace courtyard, carrying its small passenger back to the stars. Emperor. Zixthura died knowing the truth at last. Humanity had never walked away in anger. They had walked away in love, giving the galaxy the hardest gift of all, the chance to become what it could be without their invisible guidance. In the darkness of space, human ships continued their quiet work, saving lives and preventing disasters. But they no longer fixed everything. They no longer solved every problem. The galaxy would have to learn to save itself. The children were finally growing up.